Some things buried in the earth don't make sense. A crown shaped like it came from the sky. A city swallowed by sand, perfectly preserved, then forgotten. Coins that shouldn't exist, scripts that no AI can read, and vaults made of obsidian, sealed tighter than time itself. These aren't stories, they're real discoveries dug up, photographed, then quietly pushed aside. Tonight, we follow them. The artifacts that broke the rules of history, Tarim Basin mummies. Somewhere in the vast silence of western China, in a place where the wind has whispered over dry desert sands for thousands of years, a series of mysteries have remained hidden beneath the earth. The Tarim Basin, remote, sun-baked, and forgotten by time, holds within it one of the most unsettling and profound archaeological discoveries of the modern era, mummies. But not the kind you expect. These aren't wrapped in linen, sealed in royal tombs, or etched with hieroglyphs. No, these are something entirely different, something that doesn't quite fit. The first time a modern team uncovered one of these ancient remains, it must have felt surreal. A perfectly preserved body in the desert, with skin still intact, facial features almost lifelike, and hair, sometimes braided, sometimes loose, still hanging from the scalp. But what truly shook researchers wasn't just the state of preservation, it was who these people were. They looked European, fair skin, deep-set eyes, high cheekbones, blonde or red hair in some cases. In the middle of Asia, in graves dating back to nearly 4,000 years ago. Now imagine that. You're expecting local early Chinese or nomadic Asian tribes, and instead you're staring into the face of someone who wouldn't look out of place in Northern Europe, and they've been there for thousands of years, waiting. It all begins with a place called the Tarim Basin, a vast stretch of desert in the Xinjiang region. It's isolated by mountains, lashed by dust storms, and home to the Taklamakan Desert, a name that means, quite ominously, he who goes in does not come out. It's one of the most inhospitable places on Earth, and yet, beneath this dry, lifeless terrain, over 200 mummies have been unearthed. Not just bones, not fragments, but entire preserved humans, lying in silence as if they simply went to sleep long ago and never woke up. Some are buried in coffins, shaped like boats. Others are wrapped in finely woven textiles, garments that speak to craftsmanship, culture, and intentional care. A young woman known as the Beauty of Lulan lies with her serene face framed by soft brown hair. She died over 3,800 years ago, and yet she looks hauntingly modern, like someone you could pass on the street, or someone you might have known. And that's when the questions begin. How did people with such clear Western features end up in one of the most isolated regions of ancient Asia? Were they travelers, explorers, victims of migration or climate? Were they part of some lost civilization that's been erased from the historical record? Mainstream archaeology suggests they might have been Indo-European migrants, possibly from regions as far away as Eastern Europe or Central Asia. But the problem is the timing doesn't match. These people were living in the Tarim Basin long before such migrations were thought to occur, long before the Silk Road, long before there was supposed to be any such cultural contact. It's like opening a history book and finding a page that doesn't belong, or perhaps was never meant to be seen. The artifacts buried with the mummies are just as strange. Shoes made from finely stitched leather, woolen garments dyed with pigments not native to the region, even signs of complex weaving techniques that shouldn't have existed there yet. It's as if the technology and fashion appeared before the rest of the world was ready. One mummy was found buried with what appeared to be a kind of felted hat, with a tall peak like something from early Celtic or Scythian traditions. Another had tartan-style patterns in their clothing, something uncannily similar to what ancient Scottish Highlanders wore. How could such similar textile traditions emerge on opposite sides of the earth, thousands of years ago? Were they connected somehow? Or were our maps of the ancient world always incomplete? And then there's the language mystery. Some scholars have suggested that the early inhabitants of the Tarim Basin may have spoken Tocharian, an extinct branch of the Indo-European language family, again pointing to an origin far west of China. But that opens another dilemma. How far back does Indo-European spread really go? And how did it reach such a remote region so early? It's not just a cultural mystery, it's a genetic one too. When DNA analysis was done on some of the mummies, the results were shocking. They showed a combination of Western Eurasian genes, with roots tracing back to the Pontic-Caspian steppe, mixed later with East Asian ancestry. But in the earliest mummies, like the Beauty of Lulan, the genetic footprint was almost entirely Western. No trace of East Asian lineage. That suggests these people weren't travelers or traders passing through. They lived there, generation after generation. So we come to the obvious question, who were they really? Were they part of a now-forgotten civilization that developed advanced textile, burial, and navigational knowledge? Did they migrate from a place we no longer know exists? And why were they buried in such specific ways, with boats, with care, with symbols? One theory speculates that these people were the last remnants of an ancient culture that predated our known historical records, a culture that moved across Eurasia and settled in isolated pockets, perhaps fleeing war, drought, or something worse. Others suggest they were simply a unique branch of Indo-Europeans, whose culture flourished in the shadows before being absorbed or erased by rising empires. Still, there's something about the Tarim Basin that feels off-script, something too polished, too specific, too mysterious. And this is where the silence of the desert starts to feel heavy. We think we know the shape of human history. We draw tidy lines on maps, define ages by metals and stones, and trace languages like rivers from one point to the next. But sometimes, the sands reveal something else, something that doesn't obey the lines, something that suggests that civilizations may rise and fall in the spaces between what we call history. The Tarim mummies are real. Their faces are real. Their clothes, their tools, their DNA, all real. But their story, still unknown. It's almost as if they left behind a message we've yet to understand. They were buried in silence, preserved by accident or design. Maybe they were waiting to be remembered, or maybe they were never supposed to be found at all. But we found them, and now the mystery remains, just lying there, under the desert sun. The city swallowed by sand. In the remote deserts of western China, buried beneath centuries of dust and silence, lies a place the world nearly forgot. A city once alive with merchants, guards, whispers in a dozen tongues. Its name was Lulan. Today, it is a skeleton of what it once was. Crumbled walls, dried-out wells, bleached timbers poking from the sand like forgotten bones. But once, Lulan stood at the crossroads of the world. We begin with silence. Nothing stirs but the wind. The Taklamakan Desert stretches endlessly, swallowing all who enter without respect for time or intention. And there, barely discernible through the dunes, are the faded outlines of Lulan, ghostly remnants of a world that thrived 2,000 years ago. Lulan wasn't always quiet. Around the 2nd century BCE, this city thrived on the Silk Road, that vast ancient trade network connecting China with the Middle East, India, and the Mediterranean. Lulan was positioned perfectly, a gateway between East and West. Its markets buzzed with life. Traders passed through with silk, spices, jade, and secrets. Some came to trade, others to hide. Lulan welcomed them all. But what truly made Lulan mysterious wasn't just its trade, it was its sudden disappearance. For centuries, travelers spoke of the city that vanished beneath the sand. How could a city, an entire civilization, simply cease to exist? Some blamed the desert winds, others whispered of curses, a few suggested darker forces, those that move unseen but leave behind only silence. When modern archaeologists rediscovered the site in the early 20th century, they found something both haunting and beautiful. They uncovered artifacts from all corners of the ancient world, silk fragments, coins from Rome, Persian textiles. These relics told a story of wealth, complexity, and cultural fusion. Yet the structures themselves, made from reeds and wood, seemed too fragile for the harshness of the desert. Why would anyone build such a city in such an unforgiving place? And then they found her. Lying beneath layers of dry earth was a woman, perfectly preserved, her features still visible, her hair braided, her clothing intricate. The scientists called her the Lulan Beauty. She had lived 3,800 years ago, long before Lulan was ever known as a trade city. This raised questions no one expected. Who were these people? Where did they come from? What kind of technology or knowledge did they possess to bury their dead so deliberately that even the desert preserved them? The mystery only deepened when genetic tests revealed something unexpected. The Lulan Beauty wasn't Chinese. She had features more closely associated with Indo-European ancestry, fair hair, high cheekbones, and European mitochondrial DNA. This shifted the historical understanding of migration in the region. It meant that Lulan had once been a meeting ground not only of goods, but of bloodlines, cultures, and civilizations, and still, the sand whispered secrets it refused to share. One theory about Lulan's fall blames environmental collapse. The city sat beside the now-vanished Lop Nur Lake, a once mighty body of water that sustained Lulan's population. Over time, river systems feeding the lake shifted due to natural and possibly man-made changes. Without water, Lulan could not survive. The city was abandoned. The desert crept in. The wind erased paths. Only dry timbers and desiccated scrolls remained. But is that the whole story? Satellite imagery reveals something curious. Geometric shapes beneath the sand. Patterns that don't appear natural. Some believe these could be ancient irrigation systems, massive, planned, and far more advanced than previously thought. Others suggest the markings could be remnants of a much older structure, one that predates Lulan itself, something far older. That idea raises a strange possibility. What if Lulin was not the beginning, but the echo of something more ancient? What if earlier civilizations passed through this same desert, leaving behind only whispers for others to rediscover? Could the Lulin beauty be part of that deeper story? And there is another layer to this mystery. In 1990, Chinese researchers stumbled upon what they called strange ruins, not far from Lulin. The site, still largely unexcavated, seemed to possess stone blocks and formations not typical of Silk Road architecture. Some claimed it resembled a star map when viewed from above. Others dismissed it as coincidence. But in a region where nature moves slowly and erases little, every stone tells a story, if we are willing to listen. The silence around Lulin isn't just due to time. Some believe it's by design. The Chinese government declared the Lulin region a restricted zone. Entry requires special permission. Satellite access is limited. This fuels speculation. What lies beneath the surface? Why guard a city lost to sand? There are reports from desert nomads and rogue archaeologists of more than just ruins. Strange lights flickering above the sand, unusual readings from ground-penetrating radar, unmarked equipment set up miles from the main dig sites. No one speaks about it officially, but the stories linger. And still, the city sleeps. To understand Lulin is to understand a moment in time where geography, trade, climate, and humanity collided. But it's more than that. Lulin feels different. It feels like a place built with a purpose we no longer understand. Like it was positioned precisely, geometrically aligned with something we can no longer measure. Its disappearance may not just be a tragedy of water loss. It may be part of a cycle, a pattern, one that played out over millennia. Could Lulin have been a kind of observatory, a data hub for ancient knowledge? Some researchers have drawn connections between Lulin and the ancient Chinese cosmological traditions, systems that mapped stars and energy lines across the Earth. If that's true, Lulin wasn't just a desert outpost, it was a beacon. And perhaps that's why it had to vanish. The desert does not destroy, it preserves. It holds secrets not to harm us, but to challenge us, to make sure only those who truly seek understanding are rewarded with truth. That's why the sand covers Lulin like a blanket, not a grave, waiting. Somewhere beneath those shifting dunes are more clues, more artifacts, perhaps even libraries, etched onto silk. The story of Lulin isn't over, it's simply paused. And as you drift off now, picture the wooden pillars of Lulin standing once more, silk banners fluttering, camel bells ringing in the distance, a scribe dipping his brush into ink, copying a message meant for eyes thousands of years away. Your eyes. Lulin was never truly lost. It was waiting for someone, maybe you, to remember. The language with no echo. There are moments in history where silence says more than sound. Words etched into stone, painted on the walls of ancient temples, pressed into wet clay, or carved into mysterious relics. Language is lost not only in time, but in meaning. As if someone whispered their thoughts into the wind, and the wind carried them off, leaving behind only the impression of something once said. The language with no echo isn't a single code or a single ancient tongue. It's a term that fits a haunting global pattern. Messages left behind by civilizations we can no longer understand. And it's these messages, these ancient scripts that no scholar can read, that suggest the past may be even more mysterious than we dare to imagine. Across deserts, mountains, islands, and remote valleys, archaeologists have uncovered relics that carry writing no one alive today can fully decipher. Some are filled with intricate symbols, clearly designed with purpose. Others seem almost like proto-languages, so old they defy our expectations of grammar or structure. They aren't just relics, they're puzzles. Untranslated, untranslatable, and uncomfortably quiet. They look back at us like eyes in the dark, watching, waiting. The most famous, perhaps, is the Rongo-Rongo script of Easter Island. Carved into wooden tablets, it looks unlike anything else in the ancient world. Rows of glyphs arranged in a peculiar reverse boustrophedon format, where the writing snakes back and forth like a plowed field. The people of Easter Island once had no known writing system until these tablets were discovered, but no one has ever cracked them. The knowledge of how to read them, if it ever truly existed, disappeared long before modern historians arrived. Some believe Rongo-Rongo was a post-contact invention, perhaps inspired by European missionaries. Others argue it's far older, a remnant of a lost system from a forgotten past. But if the latter is true, then where did it come from, and why does no similar writing exist elsewhere in Polynesia? Then there's the Indus Valley script, found on seals and pottery, dating back over 4,000 years. These were people living in advanced urban centers, long before Rome, before Athens, even before the pyramids of Giza were complete. They had running water, planned cities, and complex trade systems. But their writing remains completely undeciphered. Thousands of small, square seals have been found, each stamped with brief texts of just a few characters. Scholars have debated whether it's even a writing system at all. Maybe it's a set of symbols for traders or clan identifiers, but others believe it is, without question, a written language, one we've simply lost the key to. There's no Rosetta Stone, no bilingual inscriptions, no known descendant languages, just silent signs. In the Linear A script from ancient Minoan Crete, we find a similar riddle. The Minoans flourished around 1700 BCE, leaving behind sophisticated palaces, intricate art, and a script that's been matched to no known language. We can read its successor, Linear B, used by the Mycenaeans to write an early form of Greek, but Linear A remains closed. It's like standing before a locked door with hundreds of keys and no way to know which might fit. Some believe it reflects a non-Indo-European language entirely lost to history. Others think it may be hiding in plain sight, using phonetics we already understand but in unfamiliar combinations. If we could read it, what would we discover about the Minoans' beliefs, their origins, their collapse? The Phaistos disc, found in Crete as well, is a circular clay tablet stamped with spiraling glyphs unlike anything else in the region. It is one of archaeology's greatest mysteries, a unique object with no parallels, no duplicates, no confirmed context. Its symbols are arranged with mathematical precision, yet the language it encodes remains unknown. Some think it could be a ceremonial prayer, others argue it's a game board. But without a second sample, no comparisons can be made. It remains a singular voice, whispering in an unknown tongue. In South America, the quipu of the Inca Empire adds another twist to this theme. It wasn't writing in the traditional sense, but bundles of knotted strings used to record data. Most modern scholars agree they were used for accounting and census purposes. But a growing number of researchers believe the color, placement, and number of knots may represent a far more complex system, possibly even a narrative language. If so, it would mean the Inca had a form of written communication, one made of fibers and knots, not ink or stone. But even with this breakthrough, the full decoding of quipu remains elusive. What stories are still hanging from those chords? What orders, what poems, what names? From the Vinca symbols of southeastern Europe to the Proto-Elamite script of Iran, the pattern repeats. Messages left by ancient hands, some thousands of years before the earliest known alphabets, yet we don't know how to read them. We stare at them like we would at the grooves on a record, knowing they contain meaning, but lacking the machine to hear it. And what if some of these scripts don't follow our assumptions at all? What if their structure isn't phonetic or syllabic, but conceptual? What if they encode meaning through images and patterns that don't map to spoken language in the way we expect? What if the knowledge required to decode them wasn't just linguistic, but cultural, cosmological, even spiritual? Some theorists go further. They argue these silent scripts could reflect a deeper symbolic language, a sort of code of consciousness, a means of communication that predates speech, even predates memory. Could these be messages left not just by ancient people, but by civilizations whose worldview was fundamentally different from our own? Societies who saw time, meaning, and language not as linear progressions but as living systems. The mystery grows deeper when you consider the similarities between some of these scripts. Certain symbols appear in both the Indus script and Easter Island glyphs. Are these coincidences, or traces of an ancient global culture we've yet to fully comprehend? If such a culture existed, its writing, its language with no echo, may have been universal, passed along trade routes and sea journeys lost to history. Its memory may live on only in symbols no one understands anymore. Today, teams of linguists, computer scientists, and AI researchers are attempting to decipher these ancient scripts using pattern recognition and deep learning. They hope to identify repeating structures, pairings, and frequencies. Some progress has been made, but for now, the bulk of these languages remain beyond us. In a world drowning in information, it's sobering to realize how much we still don't know, how many messages from our ancestors lie unread in museums, buried in deserts, or washed up on distant shores. They say history is written by the victors, but in these cases, history was written and then forgotten. The people who carved these symbols into tablets, walls, and scrolls believed they were passing on knowledge, instructions, truths. And yet, time turned their voices into silence, and that silence speaks volumes. As we drift further into sleep, imagine these scripts glowing softly on temple walls, stamped on ancient clay, or dangling from threads in the darkness of forgotten empires. They wait, they endure, and maybe one day someone will listen closely enough to hear their echo. The oasis that disappeared. In a place where silence stretches farther than the horizon, and the air is so still it feels ancient, there once lay an oasis. It wasn't a myth or a legend passed down in whispers. It was real, marked on ancient maps, fabled by travelers, sought by kings and caravans. Lop Nur, once called the heart of the Silk Road, is now gone, swallowed not by time alone, but by something stranger, something that even today, from above, still confounds satellites and scientists alike. If you look at satellite images of the region, it seems like a ghost had dragged its fingers across the land. Spiral patterns, polygonal outlines, ridges and tracks that seem too precise for nature, too chaotic for mankind, lie etched into the dry basin like scars. Nothing grows here now, and nothing has for a long time. Yet the remains speak, quietly, in the patterns, in the buried structures, and in the mysteries they left behind. Lop Nur used to be a great salt lake in the Tarim Basin of China's far west. Its location made it one of the most vital waypoints on the ancient Silk Road. Caravans rested here, kingdoms defended it, and from here, whispers of an advanced city deep within the desert began. Some believed it was a hub of lost knowledge. Others claimed the water there was infused with strange minerals, ones that could preserve not only the body, but even the mind. But then, one day, it vanished. The first disappearance wasn't the oasis itself, but the people. Lulan, a thriving city near Lop Nur, simply emptied. Its people abandoned the walls, the streets, the homes, the towers. They left in silence. No battles, no fire, no sign of struggle. As if they'd all woken up one morning and known it was time to leave, or worse, had been made to leave. Over the years, the lake began to dry. Whether from climate change, natural shifting of the riverbeds, or something more deliberate, no one knows for certain. The desert reclaimed the land, but not in the way you'd expect. What's strange about Lop Nur isn't just its disappearance, it's what got left behind, and what was possibly never meant to be found. In the 20th century, Chinese scientists began surveying the region, mainly for nuclear testing. It was then that they noticed strange land features, visible only from the sky. Satellite imagery revealed what they first believed were geological formations. But upon closer inspection, the patterns were unlike any other desert anywhere on Earth. Perfect spirals, angled corridors, large rectangular marks under the surface. Some argued these could be dried riverbeds, but others pointed out they didn't follow any natural path. They were too clean, too organized, too intentional. More mysterious was the fact that GPS and satellite signals often failed directly above certain parts of the basin. Reports from satellite operators describe interference, even malfunction, like something below was sending up a signal of its own, or perhaps distorting the ones being sent down. This wasn't just a desert, it had become a blind spot. In 1980, the Chinese archaeologist Peng Jiamu entered the Lop Nur region for a scientific expedition. He had explored these areas before, but this time he was going deeper, toward a location known only by older locals, marked on outdated maps. The team set up base, and early one morning, Peng left the camp and never returned. A massive manhunt was launched. Planes, helicopters, even military search teams combed the area. Nothing, no footprints, no gear, no trace, as if the desert had simply taken him. To this day, Peng's disappearance remains unsolved, and he's not the only one. Over the decades, multiple explorers, including military personnel, have reported strange phenomena in the region. Bright flashes on the horizon, sudden drops in temperature, temporary blindness, machinery failing. One pilot even claimed that his onboard instruments spun wildly when flying over a specific area near the ruins of Lulan, only stabilizing once he veered off course. Some theorists have proposed that Lop Nur hides something ancient beneath the sand. A grid, a chamber, a machine. They point to the unique shapes seen from above, like the circular eye patterns, reminiscent of giant gears or mandalas. Could this have once been an ancient solar observatory? Or worse, was it a kind of interface with something far older? Another idea suggests that what lies beneath isn't made by man, or at least not by any civilization we recognize. Theories range from a long-lost advanced desert culture to alien involvement. While these ideas seem fantastical, they stem from one basic truth: none of it makes sense. Sand should shift. It should blow in the wind, erase tracks, cover history. But in Lop Nur, the impressions in the land seem to resist the elements, as if they were pressed into the earth with such force and precision that even time cannot undo them. Or perhaps they're not impressions at all, but rather what remains visible of something vast, just below. Then there's the environmental data. In some core samples taken near the former lake bed, mineral layers were discovered that don't match anything found in surrounding regions. Not from mountain runoff, not from nearby rivers. These minerals appear synthetic in composition, like the byproduct of heat, pressure, and chemical processes not common in nature. One sample even revealed a thin band of material containing traces of tungsten and rare earth metals. Unusual, unless you were operating some kind of advanced energy system. But what energy system would exist in the middle of a now dead desert, unless it once powered something great? or even protected it. Locals still speak of stories passed down through generations, of lights that moved under the sand, of nights when the ground hummed, of ancient temples buried so deep they were said to be unreachable, guarded by salt, time and curse, of a city made not of bricks but of glass, not literal glass perhaps, but something translucent, something that shimmered in the light and then vanished as quickly as it appeared. The strangest tale of all speaks of a mirror, not an ordinary one, a circular surface in the middle of the desert, so smooth and bright it reflected the sky even on the cloudiest days. According to the story, when one looked into the mirror too long, they would see not themselves, but their past, and sometimes their future. Of course, no such mirror has ever been found. But then again, many things at Lop Nur have yet to be uncovered. What if what we're seeing in those satellite images are the remaining cracks of this mirror? And what if the distortion of signals isn't interference but a kind of protection? Not to keep people out, but to keep something else sealed in. Today, the Chinese government restricts access to large parts of the Lop Nur region. Officially, this is due to past nuclear tests and environmental concerns. But some argue it's because what lies beneath is still active, or at least, still watching. When you see the photos, the real satellite images, you get the sense that something was started there, maybe never finished, or maybe completed and long forgotten, like a blueprint on the Earth's surface, erased slowly by time, but never fully lost. Lop Nur isn't just a lake that dried up. It isn't just a forgotten desert. It's a scar in the planet, a place that once reflected something, energy, knowledge, or something we still don't have the words for. A mirror buried beneath a sea of shifting salt and sand, and maybe, just maybe, it's waiting to be found again. The crown that shouldn't exist. There's something peculiar about this one crown, something too intricate, too otherworldly, to ignore. A piece of gold shaped with remarkable precision, worn by a figurine that has no name, no confirmed story, and no agreed purpose. The figurine comes from the Zhou dynasty, deep in ancient China's past, and yet the object atop its head, this strange crown, feels like it belongs to another world altogether. It does not resemble anything traditionally Chinese. It looks unfamiliar. Some say futuristic. Others whisper words like extraterrestrial. But whether it is symbolic, sacred, or something far stranger, what we do know is this. This tiny silent artifact may be holding one of the oldest and most deeply buried secrets in human history. Now imagine this. It's quiet. Your eyes are getting heavy. You're lying back, listening, and slowly the mystery begins to unfold. Let's go back, thousands of years ago, to the heart of ancient China. The Zhou dynasty was not only one of China's longest-lasting dynasties, it was also a time when the spiritual world and the material world were believed to overlap. People interpreted natural events as messages from the heavens. Emperors were chosen by the mandate of heaven. Sky and earth were not separate, they were linked, and in this world of ritual, magic, and mystery, the figurine was carved. It is small, unassuming, made of metal or stone depending on the specific copy. But the real attention always goes to what sits on top of its head. A crown, strange and elaborate, spiked, ringed, layered, and not at all consistent with what we know about Zhou-era headdresses. Its closest resemblance, not to other Chinese artifacts, but to modern interpretations of space helmets. Some say it even resembles certain depictions of ancient astronauts. Now, of course, those are just theories, but it makes you wonder, what inspired the craftsman to carve it this way? Where did the design come from, and more importantly, why? The Zhou people weren't isolated. They traded, traveled, exchanged ideas with regions we wouldn't expect. They had knowledge of metallurgy and astronomy. They mapped stars. They honored cosmic cycles. Some scholars even suggest that they had records of celestial alignments far more accurate than what Europe would produce centuries later. So is it so far-fetched to wonder whether they might have recorded or even encoded something they witnessed in the sky? It's easy to dismiss the figurine as myth, but here's what makes it hard to ignore. The crown, according to some researchers, shows design elements that reflect a symmetry and complexity typically achieved through advanced geometry. Concentric circles, radiating spikes, a crown that looks like it's built with purpose, not just style. If it were purely ceremonial, why does it resemble modern electromagnetic schematics when drawn out? Some skeptics laugh this off. They say it's all coincidence, that the crown is just a stylized version of ritual wear, now exaggerated by time and imagination. But if we consider other cultures like the Sumerians, the Olmecs, the Egyptians, they too have statues, figurines, and wall carvings showing mysterious headgear, often interpreted as antennas, halos, or some kind of divine technology. Could all these ancient peoples have been hallucinating the same designs? There's something else that deepens the mystery. The figurine wasn't found in a palace or tomb where you'd expect royalty. It was unearthed in a much more remote area, far from the centers of political power. That suggests this wasn't a symbol of state, but perhaps a representation of something else, a being, a messenger, or even a memory of a visitor. And that raises another question. Did the Zhou dynasty preserve stories we've long forgotten? Were their myths encoded into ritual objects, frozen in time, waiting for modern eyes to unlock? You see, the Zhou believed the cosmos was layered, heaven above, earth below, spirits all around. They believed in the concept of Tian, heaven, as a governing force that watched over mortals and delivered messages in strange ways. Comets, eclipses, thunder, all seen as communication, and maybe, just maybe, one of those messages was interpreted, carved, and worn by this little figurine. The crown isn't the only strange detail. The figure's posture is rigid, almost alert, like it's standing on watch. Its hands, though worn by time, seem to be clasped in a specific ritual gesture, one not clearly found in other known Zhou statues. Some interpret the gesture as a signal, a salutation, or perhaps even a symbol of offering. What was being offered, and to whom? The figurine was made in a time when oral history ruled. Stories were passed from elder to youth, whispered by candlelight, shared through symbols. And in those stories, there were tales of the sky gods, celestial beings who descended from above, bringing fire and wisdom. The same kind of stories we find echoed across the globe, in Peru, in Egypt, in Sumer, and in India. Could the crown represent a visual language we no longer understand? What if the symbolism was never meant to be metaphorical? What if, for a brief moment in history, someone saw something unexplainable, and rather than write it down in words, they forged it in metal, placed it on a figure, and buried it to survive the tides of history? The figurine has since been locked away, studied, photographed, archived. It has been tested for metallurgy, carbon dated, even digitally modeled. Yet the crown remains an enigma. Every scan only reveals more symmetry, more oddity. There are no clear inscriptions, no identifying marks, no name, no story, just silence. But maybe silence is the point. Maybe the figurine wasn't meant to tell us a story in words. Maybe it's a mirror, a reflection of our need to remember, to look up at the stars and wonder, just as the Zhou did. And in this moment, lying back, eyes heavy, you begin to realize there's something deeply peaceful in not knowing all the answers. There's magic in the mystery. The figurine stands still, frozen in time, its crown pointed not at the earth but at the sky. And maybe, just maybe, that's where the answer lies. The Queen of the Sands, Lulan Beauty. There are places on earth where time does not merely pass, it gathers. Like layers of dust swept across the ages, the sands of the desert remember. They remember footsteps, whispers, and the secrets of lives long vanished. In the far reaches of China's Tarim Basin, such secrets sleep beneath dunes and salt flats. They are not loud secrets, not violent ones. They are the kind that simply wait until someone finds them. And one day, someone did. She was lying in the desert, perfectly still, wrapped in wool and time itself. The first thing that struck the archaeologist wasn't her beauty, although it would be remembered as such. It was her peace. Her delicate hands folded gently across her chest, her eyelashes still resting over closed lids, her light brown hair braided with careful intention, preserved not by intention, but by nature. She would come to be known as the Lulan Beauty. But who was she, and how did she get here, alone, in the desert, so far from the bustling cradles of early civilization? To look into her face, thousands of years old yet seemingly untouched by time, is to stare directly into a forgotten story. The desert had embalmed her better than any tomb. Her clothing was spun from wool, her boots made of soft leather, and her face was so intact, so eerily real, that researchers said it felt like standing before someone who had only just closed her eyes. But what truly unsettled scientists wasn't what they could see, but what they couldn't explain. She looked European. From the bridge of her nose to the curve of her jaw, everything about her appearance defied expectations. This wasn't what one expected from a woman buried in China's desert over 3,800 years ago. The discovery cracked open questions bigger than archaeology. Could entire peoples have moved across continents before history says they did? Could civilizations have crossed not only mountains and rivers but our assumptions? The Lulan Beauty was not alone. Around her dozens more were found, some male, some female, many of them similarly well preserved, some with red or light brown hair, some with tartan-like textiles, patterns that echoed Celtic designs, as if someone had taken the highlands of Scotland and dropped them in Asia, centuries before records began. But this isn't just a story about appearance. It's about migration. It's about who we thought lived where. It's about the buried map of humanity that doesn't match the one we printed in textbooks. For a long time, historians believed that the Tarim Basin was isolated, a cul-de-sac of culture rather than a highway. But these mummies challenge that. DNA testing, later performed in controlled laboratories, confirmed it. The Lulan beauty's genetic markers suggested Western Eurasian ancestry. These weren't locals, they were travelers. Or, were they settlers? Where did they come from? And more importantly, why did they disappear? The Tarim Basin itself is a strange place. Surrounded by towering mountain ranges like the Tian Shan and Kunlun, it is one of the most arid places on Earth. Yet thousands of years ago, it had lakes, life, trade, possibly entire communities. And when the rivers shifted, when the lakes dried, these settlements vanished, erased not by war but by silence. Lulan was once a city here. It stood near the edge of the now dry Lopner Lake, acting as a stop along the Silk Road. Once busy, bustling, and then gone. Nothing remains of it now but cracked walls buried beneath wind-blown dust. The Lulan beauty may have lived during a time when Lulan was just beginning to bloom, when travelers passed through with spices and silks, ideas and languages. It's hard to say what she believed, what she saw, whether she was born there or arrived from far away. But what is clear is this: she lived in a time of change, and something happened. Not a battle, not a fire, something slower, more patient. Desertification. One year the crops didn't grow, another the well dried up. Then the trade routes shifted. Sand drifted over the roads, and eventually, people stopped coming. The silence returned. And so, the Lulan beauty was left, lying beneath that silence. When Chinese scientists first unearthed her in the 1980s, there was a sense of disbelief. This wasn't just an archaeological find, it was a confrontation. A confrontation with a version of history that was bigger, messier, more connected than the clean timelines we were used to. What surprised many was not just her physical state, but how complex the preservation had been. She had been buried with intention, her shoes tied neatly, her hair combed. Even her clothes bore dyes and stitching that suggested advanced craftsmanship. This wasn't the work of a nomadic tribe passing through. This was culture. Perhaps not an empire, but certainly a civilization. And then there were the other mummies. Some buried with wooden masks, others with tools and food offerings. Some even had tattoos. One, now known as the Chechen Man, stood over 6 feet tall, with reddish hair and a felt hat that looked startlingly modern. They too seemed to echo the mystery of the Lulan beauty. Foreign in appearance, local in burial, and then came the political tension. As the West grew curious about these discoveries, requests were made for international study, but for years, access was limited. The Chinese government, wary of potential cultural claims and separatist narratives, kept the mummies under tight control. Still, images leaked. The Lulan beauty, on display in a glass case, became an icon, not of beauty, not of mystery, but of history's forgotten edges. She represented the parts of the past that don't fit neatly into our stories, the parts that suggest that ancient humans were not just survivors, but travelers, not just builders, but dreamers, moving, blending, sharing. The desert preserved her, but it also protected her truth. Some researchers believe the Lulan beauty, and others like her, may have come from Central Asia. Others suggest origins as far west as Europe, and still others argue for local development with cultural exchange. But all agree on one thing: these were not isolated people. They were connected, whether by trade, by migration, or by something even more ancient. Perhaps they followed rivers that no longer flow, or stars we no longer name. Today, when you visit the museum where she rests, her face still framed by her own auburn hair, it's hard not to feel something stir. She doesn't look dead. She looks patient, as if she's waiting for us to understand something we've forgotten. Not just about her, but about all of us. That the world was never as disconnected as we thought. That people moved, and blended, and became stories buried in the ground, and that sometimes, under the right conditions, those stories whisper back. So as the desert wind sweeps across the old ruins of Lulan, carrying grains of sand over ancient stones, remember this: history isn't just what we write, it's what we unearth. And the Lulan beauty, the queen of the sands, still lies in wait, her story half told, her message half heard, beneath the dust of time. The artifact that doesn't fit. Based on the Zhou dynasty figurine anomaly. There's something strangely calming about walking through a quiet museum hallway. The air feels still, suspended like time itself is choosing to pause here. The lighting is soft, the glass cases glimmer faintly, and around every corner is a fragment of a story long buried beneath the weight of forgotten centuries. Somewhere inside one of these cases sits something that doesn't quite belong. It looks old, ancient in fact. But the more you look at it, the more you realize something about this object is off. You're looking at a figurine. It's small, maybe the size of your hand. It was unearthed from a Zhou dynasty archaeological site in China. a civilization that thrived from around 146 to 256 BCE. Thousands of artifacts have been found from this period: ceramics, bronzes, jade carvings, weapons, and decorative objects. But this one, it's different. The figurine seems human at first glance, but its proportions, its design, the way it is dressed, it all starts to feel unsettling. Not in a frightening way, just in that quiet, whispering sense that something doesn't match the rest of the puzzle. Its head is shaped like a dome, not helmeted, not adorned with any known crown of the time. It appears aerodynamic, metallic even. The eyes, too large, too oval, peer out from beneath a sweeping band across the brow. The robe it wears looks ordinary, but in the center of the chest, there's a symbol, etched cleanly, sharply. It resembles no known Zhou motif. Not a tiger, not a dragon, not a phoenix. It almost seems modern, angular, something from a circuit board or a spacecraft. So what is this thing? A ceremonial figure, an artist's abstract imagination, or something else entirely? Let's drift deeper into the puzzle. The Zhou dynasty was rich in tradition. Their artisans were not experimental in the same sense modern artists are. Their work was mostly tied to ritual, nature, astronomy, and daily life. Every figure, every statue, had purpose and symbolism. This makes the oddity of this figurine even more apparent, because there's no record of anything like it. Not in the catalogs of the early Zhou, not in the chronicles of the late Zhou, not even in mythical depictions. Some have speculated, quietly, cautiously, that the figurine could represent an outsider, a being not of this land, or even of this earth. The idea might sound too fantastic, but the mystery remains. Its body structure doesn't match known human representations of the time. The feet are oddly elongated. The arms are short and curved in a strange manner. It gives the impression of someone or something that the sculptor had seen, but didn't entirely understand, like trying to describe a complex machine with just clay and hands. Now you might be wondering, how did something this strange slip through history unnoticed? The truth is, it didn't go unnoticed. It was simply unexplained, kept in backrooms, catalogued, yes, but not displayed, not talked about, because it didn't fit. And in archaeology, especially traditional archaeology, anything that doesn't fit is often quietly set aside. But what if we didn't set it aside? What if we held it up and asked the big question? What does this mean? Let's consider the possibility of memory, cultural memory. Sometimes civilizations encode stories not in words but in objects. Could this figurine be a remnant of a very old memory? A myth handed down from a time before writing? Could it depict a figure remembered from an even earlier encounter, something lost to mainstream records? There are many oral traditions around the world that speak of sky people, shining visitors, beings that descended from the stars. These stories have existed for thousands of years. Perhaps this figurine is part of that thread, an echo of an ancient encounter, retold not with scrolls but with sculpture. Let's shift now to the material. The figurine is made from a type of clay, not commonly used for figurines during the Zhou period. Tests reveal high levels of a certain mineral, one more often found in kiln-glazed tiles. Why would a figurine be crafted from such a material? It wouldn't have been common, not at all. Then there's the carving technique. The precision on the symbol etched into the chest seems ahead of its time. Not impossible for the period, but rare, very rare. The symbol itself has no known parallel. It's geometric in a way that almost suggests circuitry. Some who've studied it closely have compared it to antenna patterns or abstract diagrams from modern science. That doesn't mean the ancient artist knew those things, but it raises a more interesting idea. What if they were imitating something they saw? The Zhou dynasty was known for its deep knowledge of the heavens. They mapped stars, predicted eclipses. They believed in celestial order. Could this figurine then be connected not just to the sky but to something that came from it? There are no inscriptions around the figurine, no tablet, no scroll. Just this one, standalone artifact found in a layer of earth untouched for over 2,000 years. That silence surrounding it, the absence of explanation, only deepens the enigma. Let's imagine for a moment, the moment of its creation. A sculptor sits near a fire. The village is quiet, the stars high. In his mind is an image, something told to him by his grandfather, a visitor, a dream, a myth. He shapes the figure carefully, lovingly. It's not a god, not quite a man, it's something in between. A messenger? A watcher? The sculptor doesn't think it's strange. To him, it's a part of his world. He presses the strange symbol into the chest. He doesn't know what it means, only that it's important. He finishes, dries the clay, and buries it in a ceremonial pit. Then, time does what it always does. It moves on. The story is lost, the meaning fades, and all that remains is the object waiting to be discovered centuries later by someone who doesn't recognize it, but knows instinctively that it doesn't belong. And now, here you are, staring at it in the soft glow of a museum case, or maybe just picturing it while drifting gently into sleep. You're caught in the mystery, and you realize, maybe not everything in history fits into neat boxes. Maybe some pieces are meant to puzzle us, to whisper from the past, to suggest, gently, that the world is older and stranger than we think. And perhaps that's the true beauty of this figurine. It doesn't answer, it asks. It invites us to wonder, to imagine, to dream. So as you slowly drift into sleep tonight, remember this small, silent figure from the Zhou dynasty. Not because we know what it is, but because we don't. And that might be the most fascinating part of all. The script that outsmarted machines. In the quiet halls of universities and the dim glow of data labs around the world, teams of linguists and machine learning experts gather around dusty scrolls and digital screens. On the surface, it's just another attempt, just another fragment of forgotten language, lines of symbols that have defied human understanding for centuries. But there's something different about this one. Something unsettling. The script doesn't behave like others. It resists pattern recognition. It taunts logic. Even advanced artificial intelligence systems trained to decode languages, predict texts, and simulate translation struggle. They make mistakes. They misinterpret context. They hallucinate meanings. The machine doesn't understand, and maybe it was never supposed to. This mysterious script, discovered in fragments across Asia, the Middle East, and even parts of northern Africa, is not linked to any known civilization. It has no Rosetta Stone, no bilingual artifact to unlock its secrets. What we have are curved lines, angular strokes, and repeated symbols that suggest grammar, structure, intelligence. And yet, all attempts to decode it through statistical modeling and deep learning algorithms have returned what researchers call chaotic coherence. That is, it looks like a language, it behaves like one, but it refuses to be one. At least, not in the way we understand. Let's go back. Let's return to the start. To the first appearance of this strange script. A desert in southern Iran. Beneath layers of sediment and stone, archaeologists uncover a clay tablet, no longer than a paperback book. On it are lines of writing, symbols unknown to any present catalog. No Proto-Elamite, no Akkadian. It's older than both. Radiocarbon analysis places the artifact around 7,000 years ago, a time when agriculture had just begun to spread and human civilization was still regional and primitive. But this script was advanced, not in the way you'd expect. No extravagant pictographs or illustrations, no golden tablets, just order, lines written with purpose, line breaks, punctuation like dividers, repetition, syntax. The kind of structure that suggests not just communication, but literacy, a culture that knew how to write. A few months later, a similar tablet is discovered, this time in the Xinjiang region of China, nearly 3,000 kilometers away, but the symbols are identical. Now researchers are confused. How did a script, an entire writing system, appear in two different regions, so far apart, without any evidence of trade routes, migration patterns, or cultural crossover? And why does this script not evolve? Languages change. That's their nature. Old English to Middle English to Modern English, Sumerian to Akkadian. Symbols get simplified. Words get shorter. Grammar loosens over time. But this script doesn't evolve. Wherever it's found, whether on stone or clay, in Asia or North Africa, the symbols are exactly the same. No drift. No variation, almost like it was preserved, or intentionally copied. But by who? This is where AI comes in. In 2017, a team at MIT partnered with a deep learning group at Google to see if they could crack the code. They fed the system thousands of known scripts: Sanskrit, Linear A, Linear B, cuneiform, hieroglyphs. They trained it on translation logic, language trees, frequency patterns. Then, they fed it the mystery script. At first, the machine did what it always does. It categorized the symbols, mapped their frequency, built statistical relationships, and then, it broke. Not literally, but conceptually. The machine began outputting strange translations, sentences in Latin that made no sense, merged fragments of Mandarin and Finnish. At one point, it generated a full page of text in a language that doesn't exist. When researchers reviewed it, they realized the machine wasn't translating, it was hallucinating meaning. The AI had fallen into what one researcher called a semantic loop, a trap where every symbol leads nowhere and yet still appears meaningful, like chasing a ghost through a mirror maze. Even more strangely, the AI began recognizing the script as self-referencing. Some symbols seemed to encode their own rules. A looped spiral might mean repeat previous. A vertical bar may negate the symbol before it. Layers within layers. Syntax within glyphs. Suddenly the researchers weren't looking at a lost language, they were looking at a program. Not a spoken language, but code, and the implications were staggering. Was this an ancient form of machine language, a symbolic protocol, some early human attempt to embed knowledge in a way that would resist time, war, and even interpretation? Was it meant to outsmart us? More findings poured in. One of the tablets, found in Turkey, contained what looked like mathematical formulas, ratios, even hints at binary sequences. Another tablet, from the deserts of Libya, had been carved on both sides, on one side the symbols, on the other, what appeared to be star charts. Researchers started calling it the echo script, not because it echoed language, but because it didn't. Nothing echoed back. No translation, no linguistic roots, no known culture, just silence. And that silence grew louder when an AI built specifically for symbol recognition tried to render it in digital 3D. It failed, every time. Because the script, when converted to spatial format, shifted, like an optical illusion. What looked like a triangle on one plane turned into a spiral from another. Some symbols even disappeared when rotated. The code wasn't just visual, it was dimensional. This led to a stunning theory. What if this script isn't static at all? What if it was designed to only be read at a certain time, or under certain conditions? A code locked not by language, but by perception. The machines couldn't crack it, because they lacked context. Just like a blind person might hold a painting but never feel the colors, the AI lacked something critical, something human, emotion, intuition, cultural memory. So now the world stands still. We have the script, we have the tools, we have the minds, but we don't have the key. And maybe, that's the point. Maybe this was meant to remain unsolved until we, as a species, reach the state where understanding it isn't just possible, but necessary. Maybe it's waiting, not for us, but for the version of us that's ready. Until then, it sits in museums, silently carved on brittle clay and ancient stone, resisting every effort to be understood. A script that tricked the machines, outsmarted the humans, and whispers secrets that none of us are quite ready to hear. The Ring of the Sky King. There is a tomb in China that was never meant to be found. For over 3,000 years, it lay untouched beneath a layer of ancient soil, buried deep in the forgotten ruins of a lost capital. The tomb belonged to a woman named Fu Hao, a queen, a priestess, and a general. But it was not her titles that stunned archaeologists when her resting place was finally unearthed. It was what she was buried with. Among the hundreds of bronze artifacts discovered, one particular object refused to fit into the story. A bronze ring too advanced, too refined, and too symbolic for the time it supposedly came from. While most rings from that period were simple, ceremonial, or decorative, this one felt different, like it was made with knowledge that didn't yet exist. Archaeologists cataloged it like the others, photographed it, measured it, analyzed the alloy content, but nothing about it aligned with the expected metallurgy of the Shang dynasty. Its craftsmanship rivaled techniques that wouldn't be seen for over 1,000 years. And what truly set it apart was not just its design, but what seemed to be embedded in it. Symbols, tiny patterns, etched so faintly into the surface that they only became visible under high magnification scans. Patterns that looked like star charts, not ones we use today, but older, stranger, from constellations that no longer exist. Who made this ring, and how did it end up buried with a woman who lived before the Iron Age began? Fu Hao's tomb is unique in many ways. Discovered in 1976 near Xinjiang in Henan province, it was the only Shang royal tomb found completely intact. No looters, no damage, just sealed history, preserved under centuries of silence. When researchers opened it, they didn't expect to find such wealth. Over 1,600 burial items were recovered: jade, bone, ivory, weapons, and more than 400 bronze artifacts. But one object kept turning up in research papers, even when it wasn't supposed to be the main focus: the bronze ring. Initially, it was filed away as an ornamental bracelet, a woman's jewelry. But after further imaging, some archaeologists began to suggest it might be something more than decoration. The alloy was unusually pure, the geometry was mathematically precise, and embedded deep in the metal, barely visible, were concentric patterns that almost looked like timekeeping dials. There is no confirmed proof that ancient China had ring-based technology, but the bronze in this artifact had been cooled slowly, in a process that implied knowledge of temperature control and casting refinement, centuries ahead of its time. And what's more intriguing is that similar designs, nearly identical in fact, appear in later astronomical devices. Could this ring have been an early attempt at tracking the skies? Fu Hao herself was no ordinary queen. She was a military commander who led thousands of troops into battle, a shaman who conducted rituals to speak with the gods, and a wife of King Wu Ding, whose court chronicled dreams, omens, and celestial signs with obsessive detail. If there was anyone in ancient China who might have held a ring like this, something symbolic, something sacred, maybe even something functional, it was her. But there's another theory. one that archaeologists are hesitant to write down in official journals. The ring might not have originated from her time. Some researchers have pointed out that the design on the ring's edge resembles the layout of a later Chinese invention, the armillary sphere, a tool used to model the celestial sphere. But the first documented armillary spheres in China appeared over 1,000 years after Fu Hao's death. So how could this ring reflect a design that didn't yet exist? Unless the knowledge was already there, passed down, or discovered earlier than we thought. Or perhaps the ring was older than the tomb itself. This is where the trail gets foggy. Carbon dating can't be done on metal, so we can't test the age of the bronze itself. Only the context where it was found gives us clues. But even that isn't definitive. In tombs, items are often handed down across generations. If this ring came from an older dynasty or a forgotten civilization, its true age would be lost beneath the assumptions we place on it. It gets stranger when you look at other artifacts in Fu Hao's tomb. Some of the bronze vessels contain inscriptions written in a language that doesn't fully match standard Shang script. A handful of characters appear only once in all recorded history, never repeated, never explained, almost like they were meant for someone who already understood them. Then there's the arrangement of items in the tomb. The bronze ring wasn't placed randomly. It was located at the queen's left wrist, angled inward toward her chest, as if meant to be held close, protected, perhaps even activated. Some cryptographers have even joked that the symbols on the ring look like early circuit patterns. That's likely just pattern recognition bias. But the fact that it keeps being mentioned across disciplines, history, metallurgy, astronomy, cryptography, suggests there's something about this object that refuses to be dismissed. It sits now in a museum vault, catalogued, photographed, yet largely ignored by mainstream history. And still, that quiet question lingers. Why would a military queen from 1200 BCE be buried with what looks like an ancient miniaturized star map? There's no proof the ring was used for communication, but similar circular devices called heavenly discs appear in myths and legends throughout ancient Chinese texts, often associated with kings, sky-watching priests, or messengers from the heavens. Some legends even speak of rings that allow one to speak to the stars. Is it possible that Fu Hao, known to speak with spirits and lead battles guided by omens, possessed a tool meant to interpret something beyond the earthly realm? Or was the ring simply a symbol, a representation of power and divine favor? A token that said, "This woman holds the sky in her hands." Whatever the answer, it remains sealed in bronze, unmoving, quiet, just like the tomb it came from. Maybe the sky still holds the rest of the story. Maybe it always did. The city that reversed time. High above the deserts of Xinjiang, where the land is carved by wind and silence, there lies a city that looks like time gave up trying to bury it. A city not built upon land, but carved directly from it. Seen from the sky, its remains appear like veins across a dried-out leaf, or the fossil of something once living. But this place was no ordinary ruin. It's called Jiaohe, and its story is so strange, so stubbornly intact, that some researchers believe it might not just be a window into the past, but into time itself. Unlike most ancient cities that decay into the ground, Jiaohe seems to have risen in reverse. The more time passed, the more of it was revealed. As centuries of sand shifted and wind pulled at the cliffs, what emerged wasn't just stone foundations, but entire streets, homes, alleyways, and temples, still exactly where they had been left more than 2,000 years ago. Jiaohe doesn't sit on a hill, it is the hill. Carved into a natural plateau of yellow earth between two riverbeds, the city is a single mass of sun-baked clay and stone. No walls were brought in, no bricks laid. Everything from the homes of ordinary people to the towering Buddhist monastery at its heart was hollowed out of the land itself, not constructed, but sculpted. This wasn't just for defense, though it certainly helped. Jiaohe was invisible from a distance, shielded by the cliffs and rivers. But there's something else about its design, something haunting. There are no doors. Many of the ancient structures had no traditional entrances from the ground. Instead, residents descended into rooms by ladders, entering from the roof. It's as if the city wasn't built for looking out, but for looking in. Even the main avenue, which runs straight through the center of Jiaohe like a spine, seems designed to lead the traveler deeper into stillness, not activity. Walking it now is like moving backward through time, every step peeling away layers of centuries. And strangely, the deeper you go into the city, the older it feels. Archaeologists who study Jiaohe describe something unusual about its layers. Typically, when you dig into an ancient city, the deeper you go, the older the structures. That's natural. Civilization builds on top of itself. But in Jiaohe, that logic seems reversed. The oldest, most sacred structures, like the monastery, sit at the city's highest point, fully exposed. The deeper layers, the residential areas and gathering spaces, seem newer. It's as if time flowed in the wrong direction here, as if the spiritual center of the city emerged first, and life spread outward and downward from there. This reversal has puzzled researchers for decades, and it raises a deeper mystery. Why was this city abandoned so suddenly, and why is it so well preserved despite that? Jauhar was once a major stop on the Silk Road, a living hub where cultures, religions, and goods moved through like wind in the desert. But unlike other cities on the route which were sacked, rebuilt, or eroded by centuries of rain and invasion, Jauhar stands eerily intact. There are no signs of violent destruction, no fire damage, no toppled pillars, just silence. Almost as if everyone simply walked away one day and never returned. The climate helps explain part of the preservation. Xinjiang's dry air and lack of rainfall means erosion happens slowly, but that doesn't explain the sharp lines of the rooftops, the doorways still standing. The fact that even the drainage channels cut through the streets to carry water still remain defined. Time didn't forget Jauhar, it respected it. From the air, the city looks almost artificial, like someone in the sky carved a circuit board into the land. It's that orderly, that symmetrical. Even now, drone footage captures a geometric harmony that seems too advanced for its age. Lines that connect buildings not just practically, but possibly cosmically. Some fringe researchers have even suggested that the layout of Jauhar aligns with ancient astronomical patterns. The orientation of the temple complex and main avenue may have been set to match solstice shadows. If true, it would mean the city wasn't just designed for trade or defense, but to echo the rhythms of the heavens. Others have proposed that Jauhar wasn't simply a city at all, but a spiritual machine, a sacred space carved to harness silence, solitude, and celestial cycles, a place where monks didn't just live, but trained their minds to perceive time differently. Could that explain the unusual architectural flow, the downward homes, the rooftop entries, the spiral-like movement from the monastery outward? We can't know for sure. The city left no written records of daily life, and yet its shape speaks volumes. Even today, standing within the sunken alleyways of Jauhar, visitors report feeling a strange disorientation. Not dizziness, but something quieter, a feeling that time is not moving forward the way it should, that it's standing still, or curling inwards. There's an eerie serenity to it, the kind that doesn't come from silence, but from something deeper, a place that absorbed time, instead of aging with it. What makes this even more haunting is how Jauhar eventually disappeared from memory. After centuries of thriving under various empires, the city fell into decline after the Mongol invasion. But even then, the invaders didn't destroy it, they bypassed it, left it intact, and soon after, people simply stopped living there. No great disaster, no war, just a slow fading, and yet the buildings still stand, not just as ruins, but as shadows of a city that seems paused, mid-thought. If we view history as a straight line, Jauhar challenges that line. It suggests something cyclical, something spiraling, a sense that ancient people may have understood time, not as a march forward, but as something to be moved within, like a current, or a meditation. The monks who once lived in those cliff-cut dwellings likely didn't see their city as abandoned. They may have seen it as completed, left behind, not because it failed, but because its purpose was fulfilled. And now, it sleeps in the desert sun, not decaying, but waiting. A fossil of consciousness, a carved memory. The city that reversed time, maybe not in clocks, but in meaning. The pyramid that faced the wrong way. You're lying there, the lights dim, your mind slowly unwinding from the day. Now imagine a desert, not the kind you see in postcards, but an ancient, whispering sea of sand. The wind carries stories, and buried in this desert, hidden in plain sight, stands a pyramid that no one can fully explain, not because of what's inside, but because of the way it faces. Not towards the sun, not aligned with the stars. It's as if it defies logic, as if it was built for something, or someone, we've never understood. Welcome to Medum, Egypt. The Medum Pyramid is one of Egypt's lesser-known pyramids. It doesn't get the same attention as Giza or Saqqara, but it should, because this pyramid faces the wrong way, and that's not the only strange thing about it. Let's start with what's visible. From a distance, the Medum Pyramid looks like a tower or a collapsed layer cake. It wasn't always like this. At one time it might have stood tall, perhaps even the tallest of its era. Some scholars think it was a transitional piece, an experiment between step pyramids and smooth-sided pyramids. But that story doesn't explain why it faces due north. Ancient Egyptian structures were almost always aligned with cosmic or solar principles. True north, cardinal points, solstices. The Giza pyramids, for instance, are aligned almost perfectly with the Orion constellation and with the points of the compass. But the Medum Pyramid is off. Not wildly, just wrong enough to make people curious. Archaeologists initially dismissed it as poor planning, a construction error. Or maybe the architects lacked the tools to get it right. But that explanation doesn't sit well when you consider how sophisticated other Egyptian monuments were, how perfectly aligned the Great Pyramid is, even by modern standards. So what happened here? Let's take a slow walk back through time. The Medum Pyramid is often attributed to Pharaoh Sneferu. He was the father of Khufu, the man who built the Great Pyramid at Giza. Sneferu is known for building not one, not two, but at least 3 pyramids in his lifetime. Some say 4, and each one was a leap forward in engineering. The Medum Pyramid may have been his first attempt at a true pyramid, one with smooth sides instead of steps, but if you look closely at the ruins today, something doesn't quite add up. It appears to have been converted, almost like it started as a step pyramid and was later covered in a smooth casing. But the casing collapsed. Only the inner core remains. Some claim this was a structural failure. Others think it was intentional, a symbolic ruin, a message, not a mistake. Now here's where it gets strange. Most pyramids are built to face the sun, east, usually, or they align with sacred stars. But this one, it's rotated. It faces true north, but just slightly askew. Enough to be unsettling, as if someone was trying to hide it, or reveal something else. There's a theory, quietly whispered among alternative researchers, that the Medum Pyramid was not built for the sky, it was built for something beneath. Some believe the alignment isn't about celestial navigation at all, it's about subterranean mapping. Underneath the sands of Egypt, there's a vast network of unknown chambers. Some are natural, some are man-made. The Medum site has no confirmed burial chamber, no sarcophagus, no inscriptions. It's hollow, in a way that makes you wonder if its real purpose was never funerary, but functional. Was this pyramid marking something underground, an energy point, a forgotten city, a buried device? Even mainstream researchers admit that Medum's foundations are unusual. The base is dug deep into bedrock, much deeper than necessary for a simple monument. Why? What were they anchoring it to? Let's pause a moment. Visualize standing at the base of the Medum Pyramid today. The air is dry, the sun is setting behind you. The remaining steps of the structure rise sharply like a stone tower. Sand crunches under your feet. There are no crowds here, no tourist signs, just silence, and this enormous, misaligned relic that seems to whisper secrets the wind once knew. Why would a pharaoh like Sneferu, known for his ambition and engineering mastery, allow a pyramid to collapse? Why would he build it off-angle? Why does this one feel different? Some researchers believe that the pyramid wasn't built by Sneferu at all, that it was inherited, found, renovated, much like the Sphinx, which shows signs of far older erosion patterns. Could the Medum Pyramid be a repurposed structure whose original builders are forgotten? There's another strange detail. The Medum site contains a long causeway, a ceremonial walkway leading from the pyramid outward, but it doesn't align with the Nile. It doesn't point toward any city. It vanishes into the desert, as if the procession was meant to follow something unseen, perhaps something buried. Old maps hint that ancient trade routes once passed this way, camel caravans, salt traders, priests on pilgrimage, but none of them stopped here for long. The place felt wrong. Locals avoided it. Even the Bedouins whispered that the pyramid was cursed, that people who went inside never returned. It's hard to tell where myth ends and history begins. What we do know is that Medum was abandoned early, left unfinished. Some even say sabotaged. Not just because it collapsed, but because someone may have wanted it forgotten. There's a school of thought again, not mainstream, but growing, that the Medum Pyramid was part of a much older network, that it predates Sneferu by centuries, maybe even millennia. The orientation, the construction style, and the absence of hieroglyphs all suggest an origin outside traditional Egyptian methods. Now imagine this. If the pyramid was built to face a very specific point underground, what if that point has shifted? What if magnetic pole drift or crustal displacement altered how the pyramid appears today? In other words, what if it's not the pyramid that's misaligned, but us? That kind of thinking opens the door to something larger, a global map, a forgotten system of energy grids, stargates, ley lines, or something we haven't even named yet. Could Medum be one of those markers? Of course, we may never know. The Egyptian authorities have sealed many of these sites. Excavations are restricted. Much of what's underground remains unexplored. But sometimes, it's not about finding answers. Sometimes, it's about sitting with the mystery, letting it wash over you, like the warm air rising off the desert, like the long shadows cast by ancient stones, like the echo of a question so old that even time has forgotten how to ask it. The coins that shouldn't exist. Somewhere in the back corner of a dimly lit museum in central China, in a glass case lined with faded red velvet, lies a set of bronze coins. Coins that by every known timeline of history simply should not exist. They are circular, pierced with a square hole in the center, like many from ancient China, but their surfaces tell a different story. The symbols aren't Chinese. In fact, they don't resemble any known script, ancient or modern. They are, to put it simply, misplaced in both time and space. Discovered during a routine excavation near the ruins of a Zhou dynasty outpost, these coins were unearthed beside typical artifacts of that era: ceramic jars, bone tools, and broken jade ornaments. Yet these coins stood apart, too sophisticated in design, with what appeared to be a form of micro-engraving, something thought to be impossible for the time. What makes this case even stranger is that no other objects nearby bore the same symbols. It was as if someone or something had intentionally buried them there, among authentic Zhou relics, in a calculated attempt to blur the lines between the ordinary and the inexplicable. Some experts tried to brush it off as a hoax, planted by modern hands to stir controversy. But metallurgical analysis told a different story. The bronze composition matched no modern alloying techniques, and the patina covering the coins suggested a depth of aging that would take centuries to develop. The corrosion patterns weren't artificially induced. They were real, natural, ancient. The coin's square holes and outer rings do suggest influence from Zhou currency, but the engravings? They follow a logic no one has been able to decode. The symbols repeat in strange cycles, as if following a rhythm. Some believe they resemble star charts, others think they are glyphs from a long-lost language, one not born on this continent, or maybe not even on this planet. But before we dive too deep into speculation, let's slow down and look carefully at where this story begins. Back in the dry riverbeds near the northern borders of the ancient Zhou kingdom, where explorers first stumbled upon the strange site, the initial dig wasn't even focused on coins. It was meant to catalog old trade posts along the Silk Road. Yet buried in what seemed to be a collapsed merchant station, the diggers found a peculiar stone box. It wasn't ornate, it wasn't large, just a plain, rectangular container sealed with wax that had fossilized over centuries. When the team pried it open, they expected scrolls or relics, but instead, there they were, 7 small coins, stacked neatly in a row, still slightly green with oxidization but intact. Their weight felt wrong, too light, as if they were made with unknown techniques that maximize strength with minimal metal. The coins were immediately sent for lab analysis, and that's when the real mystery began. Scanning electron microscopy revealed subsurface channels, tiny grooves invisible to the naked eye. These grooves seemed to be part of an embedded design, like a circuit or code running beneath the top layer. Historians had no way to explain it. Some engineers suggested the coins resembled primitive data storage disks, though from a time when the concept shouldn't have existed. The strange writing on the coins couldn't be matched to any known ancient script, not Egyptian, Sumerian, Chinese, or Proto-Indo-European, and attempts to decode it using AI-based linguistic models yielded nothing but noise. The symbols refused to cooperate, but a retired professor of semiotics at Beijing University noticed something no one else had. The arrangement of the symbols followed Fibonacci sequences. Not exact math, but ratios, patterns that mirrored the growth of organic life, shells, and galaxies. That led to a new wave of theories. Were these coins designed by a civilization that understood nature's code? A group with knowledge far exceeding its time. Some fringe researchers even suggested the coins weren't monetary at all. Perhaps they were tokens, keys or markers, used to identify or communicate across regions or dimensions. One coin, when photographed under infrared light, revealed a faint concentric ring that appeared only in specific heat ranges. It's like the coin was hiding information that could only be seen with tools we've only recently developed. And then came the strangest discovery of all. The coins emitted low-level electromagnetic pulses, not strong enough to be dangerous, but enough to interfere with nearby digital devices. Smartphones glitched, compasses spun, cameras recorded static. No known ancient object from the Zhou period has this effect. And that means the coins are either not from that period at all, or they are evidence that the Zhou people had access to knowledge we've long thought impossible. Now think about this. These coins were buried alone. No other duplicates have ever been found, just those 7, and each of them is slightly different, like they were prototypes, part of a sequence or a collection. The museum where they now rest has no plaque explaining their origin, just a generic label, unclassified currency, Zhou period, Aproxis. Visitors barely glance at them, but for those who know what they're looking at, they're not just artifacts, they're anomalies. What if these coins were more than currency? What if they were messages, tokens of contact? What if they are a trail left behind by an intelligence we no longer remember? We may never know the full truth about the coins that shouldn't exist, but we do know this. History has gaps, not cracks. Gaps, intentional voids where the unknown waits, buried just below the surface of the familiar. And sometimes, all it takes is a single misplaced object to remind us that we're still far from understanding the true story of our past. So as you drift into sleep tonight, remember this: even the smallest coin can tip the balance of what we believe is possible. And maybe, just maybe, Tomorrow we'll uncover something even stranger. Tomb of the Glass-Eyed Sentinel. Some discoveries leave archaeologists speechless, not because of what they find, but because of what those finds seem to suggest. This is one of those cases. Deep beneath layers of dust and undisturbed silence, a burial site was unearthed in a forgotten corner of an ancient land. But what lay inside wasn't just another set of bones or royal remnants. It was a figure unlike any recorded in the region's known dynasties. A skeleton, semi-intact but resting in a stone coffin so precisely carved, it appeared machine-shaped. Its eye sockets weren't empty. They shimmered with gems, glass-like orbs embedded into the skull, almost as if the person had been interred with a pair of artificial eyes. No inscriptions, no burial markings, no known cultural references that explain why a figure would be buried this way. The excavation was part of a routine survey near a decayed citadel ruin already dated back to the early Bronze Age. The archaeologists expected pottery fragments, maybe remnants of trade. What they didn't expect was a sealed chamber just 3 meters below the earth. A rectangular vault, sealed with slabs of perfectly balanced stone, with minimal air leakage over thousands of years. Inside, the air was still, cold, preserved. The skeleton's position didn't suggest a typical burial. It was laid flat, arms aligned, hands over its chest, as if in ceremonial protection. But the most bizarre element was, of course, the eyes. Glass-like, emerald-tinted on the right, amber glowing on the left. Tests revealed they weren't made of modern glass, nor of simple mineral, some hybrid of silicate and a rare earth compound not commonly used in ancient craftsmanship. What was their purpose? Were they spiritual? Decorative? Or did they serve some function we can no longer comprehend? Some suggested the figure might have been a sentinel, maybe a guardian of the tomb. But that raised more questions than answers. Guardians were usually symbolic carvings, not literal burials. Others theorized this was a person of power. But again, no royalty has ever been recorded with this style of burial. Not in this region, not in any known text. The coffin itself was a marvel, not chiseled or weathered, but smoothed on every edge. And the stone used wasn't from local quarries. It had to be imported. From where, no one knows. Nearby sediment didn't match. No roads led here. And yet the coffin had been set perfectly into the chamber, balanced, undisturbed, and surrounding the tomb were smooth walls bearing no carvings, just faint impressions of spiral patterns, almost like etched whirlpools of energy or movement, like something had swirled through time and settled here. Carbon dating placed the skeleton at over 3,700 years old. That's older than the earliest structured dynasties in that part of the world, older than any record in the region's archives. But the jewelry, the eyes, they defied aging. They hadn't decayed. They hadn't fogged up. They were flawless, like they had just been manufactured and placed there hours ago. Were they replaced in more recent history? Was the grave looted and later resealed? The layers of soil and mineral sealing the vault suggested otherwise. It had remained untouched since its burial. Local folklore speaks of watchers, sentient figures buried with eyes that could see beyond death. They were rumored to be placed in stone chambers to guard ancient knowledge. Some say they were messengers between the living and the sky gods. Others claim they weren't human at all. Beings from another realm, disguised as kings, left behind to observe, not to interfere, just to witness. The area surrounding the tomb has now been quarantined for research. Ground-penetrating scans revealed more anomalies, more sealed chambers deeper down, waiting. But digging further could destabilize the site. For now, the sentinel remains alone, watching, silent. Experts tried to replicate the compound in the eye orbs. Laboratories failed. The structure was too complex, layers within layers. Some particles seemed to absorb light, while others reflected specific frequencies. When infrared light was beamed at them, strange pulses returned. Not data, not reflections, something else. Irregular responses, as if the gems were reacting. The coffin was lifted from its chamber and taken to a secured museum facility. But something strange happened on transport. The sensors inside the case used to monitor humidity and pressure started misfiring. Every 15 minutes on the dot, they picked up a faint pulse, just a vibration, rhythmic. It stopped the moment the coffin reached the containment room. But inside the sealed display, it happened again. 15 minutes, a pulse, as if something inside still moved or remembered. Skeptics argue it's a mechanical error, just sensor interference. Others aren't so sure. One researcher reportedly claimed the gem eyes weren't just decorative. He believed they were designed to store information, like data crystals, except thousands of years before that concept was ever invented. And if they store data, then what's locked inside? The project's been slow since. Scientists disagree on how to proceed. The fear is that extracting the eyes may destroy them, but leaving them sealed means the secrets inside may never be accessed. Some are pushing for a non-invasive scan. Others, mostly quietly, believe the tomb was never meant to be opened. Still, theories continue to emerge. Crown of the Altai Priest King. In the wind-blown mountains of southern Siberia, tucked between the icy fingers of the Altai Range, an excavation began with little more than a rumor, a whisper from a local shepherd who claimed to have stumbled upon a strange rock arrangement while following the migration trail of elk. He spoke of stone rings, bone fragments, and something that shimmered beneath the frost. It was enough to bring in a team of archaeologists. They came expecting burial mounds, perhaps another Scythian grave. But what they uncovered would confuse and mesmerize even the most experienced researchers. At the heart of the mound was something no one expected, a feathered crown, preserved in ways that defied logic. It was resting atop the skull of a figure buried in a sitting position, facing east, toward the rising sun. The bones were old, older than the nomadic records in the area, older than the burial styles known from any nearby tribes. This wasn't a chieftain's grave. It felt ceremonial, spiritual, and that crown, it wasn't ornamental in the way a royal artifact might be. It was something else, a construction of organic material, leather, bone, and dozens of perfectly aligned feathers from now extinct alpine birds. The feathers were vivid, not fossilized, not disintegrated. Their color remained, deep greens, faded purples, metallic hints like iridescent oil reflecting the cold Altai sun. Feathers shouldn't survive in that condition, not after more than 2,500 years. Yet they did. The crown's base was woven from twisted sinew, delicate but strong, interlocked through loops of what looked like treated bark, lined with tiny discs made of bone. In the center sat a flattened stone, not precious, not shiny, but carved with symbols. Symbols no one had seen before. They weren't Scythian, they weren't Turkic, and they weren't Russian. They didn't match anything. It became clear that this wasn't a warrior. This wasn't a general, or a ruler in the political sense. This person had been something different, a keeper of knowledge, a spiritual intermediary, a priest-king of a forgotten world. The burial chamber itself was strange. It had no real walls, just earth cut away with surprising precision. Charcoal traces showed a fire had once been burned nearby, and around the seated skeleton were arranged tools, none of them weapons, pipes made from eagle bones, containers carved from horn, and a large circular drum made of hide stretched tight across a wooden hoop, its surface etched with a sunburst design. These weren't grave goods for power. They were implements of ritual, of ceremony. Whoever this was, they didn't rule with a blade. They ruled with symbols. The feathers, when tested, didn't come from birds in the Altai region. In fact, they didn't match any known species cataloged today. The closest match was a type of mountain pheasant, long extinct, but even then, the colors didn't align. These feathers shimmered unnaturally. Some scientists suggested a type of early dye, but chemical testing revealed nothing artificial. They were naturally that color. How? Even more puzzling, the crown appeared to have been repaired multiple times. Under a microscope, researchers found binding threads, aged differently. Some strands were at least 2,400 years old, others only about 1,600. It meant the crown was passed down, maintained, worn by more than one figure, but always with reverence, always with precision. So what was this crown, really? Theories range from the academic to the fantastical. Some believe it was the ceremonial headpiece of an elite shamanic order, priests who served as mediators between the living and the mountain spirits. The feathers, they say, allowed the wearer to spiritually fly, to transcend into other realms during trance or ritual. Others claim the feathers represented something else entirely, not flight, but communication, a way to signal to the heavens, to channel messages, to access memories of a world long gone. The priest-king was not just a figure of power, he was a memory keeper. One particular theory gained traction among mystics and alternative historians. They point to the strange preservation of the feathers, the unexplained symbols, the buried drum, the eastward position. They believe the crown came from a pre-cataclysmic era, that the priest-king wasn't of one culture, but a bridge between dying civilizations, a remnant of a forgotten age when knowledge was passed through vision, vibration, and sacred ritual. What supports these ideas is how alone the burial was. No other graves near it, no shared burial ground. Just this one, specific, honored figure, sealed away from the world. Almost as if he were being hidden, or protected, like a time capsule. And then there are the dreams. Several archaeologists who worked on the crown later reported unusual sleep disturbances, nightmares, visions. Some dreamed of a great white bird flying through a black sky, its wings trailing sparks. Others described hearing a distant drumbeat, always in rhythm, always pulling them east. Some felt a presence during the excavation, watching. The feather crown was eventually moved to a climate-controlled museum facility. Visitors aren't allowed to get close, but even from a distance, you can feel it. There's something unsettling, or maybe humbling, like you're looking at something you're not meant to fully understand. One curator, who spent over 3 decades preserving ancient Siberian artifacts, refused to work with the piece. He said the feathers reminded him of eyes. Not bird feathers. Eyes. Watching. Knowing. And every time he turned away, he swore the reflection in the display glass would shift, just slightly, as if the crown knew it was being seen. What we do know is this. The crown of the Altai priest king doesn't fit into any known timeline. The symbols have not been translated. The feathers should not exist, and the spiritual practices they suggest, if real, are far older than any written record in the region. In a modern world of digital maps, satellite archaeology, and carbon testing, the crown still whispers secrets none of our tools can crack. It reminds us that the ancients weren't primitive. They weren't guessing. They knew things we've forgotten, understood rhythms we no longer feel. So when the wind moves through the Altai passes, curling around the peaks, swirling through the stones, maybe it carries more than snow. Maybe it carries memory. Maybe it carries the silent echo of a priest king's drum and the soft rustle of feathers that were never just for decoration. And in some quiet corner of a vault, sealed behind glass, that ancient headdress waits, not for fame, not for reverence, it waits for recognition. The obsidian vault of Karahan Tepe. Somewhere deep beneath the sun-baked plains of southeastern Turkey lies a story that has barely begun to be understood. Long before cities, long before written language, there were places built with purpose, carved by hands that left no name, no book, no legacy, other than stone. Karahan Tepe is one such place. But what makes this site truly unnerving, even among the many ancient wonders of Anatolia, is what researchers have begun to suspect lies beneath it. An obsidian vault, unnaturally precise, oddly cold to the touch, and entirely out of place. Karahan Tepe is often overshadowed by its more famous sister site, Göbekli Tepe. But those who study these prehistoric ruins know better than to call it a secondary discovery. Some even say that Karahan is the older of the two, and it's here, amid its pillars and buried chambers, that whispers of the obsidian vault first began. Let's step back for a moment and imagine this land as it was over 11,000 years ago, when humans had only just begun gathering in groups, still grasping at the concept of civilization. No wheels, no pottery, no writing, and yet someone, or some group, managed to transport and carve volcanic glass. Not just shape it, but seal it into a vault, smooth as mirror, and hidden in silence for millennia. When researchers first stumbled upon black, mirror-like fragments during excavation, they believed it to be incidental, just shards from obsidian tools. But deeper surveys showed alignment. The fragments formed part of a wall, buried beneath layers of stone and sediment. A wall that wasn't broken, but intentionally concealed. It's not just the material that's strange. Obsidian is rare in this part of Turkey, and yet this vault contains enough of it to rival the obsidian caches found in central Anatolia and even Armenia. It had to be imported, carried over rugged terrain without wheels or carts. This is not something done casually. It suggests a purpose, perhaps sacred, or perhaps secret. Ground-penetrating radar, cautiously used due to the site's fragile nature, hinted at an angular cavity beneath one of the eastern enclosures. But what caught the attention of the few who've been allowed to study it is the way the cavity sharply reflects signals, almost too cleanly. The boundaries are crisp. The shape is geometric. It's not natural. When viewed through these scans, the vault appears rectangular, not unlike a modern chamber. There are no visible doors, no signs of entrance, sealed from all sides. But its dimensions are exact, almost too exact for a Neolithic construction. And within it, nothing can be confirmed. No tools, no human remains, no carvings, only silence and blackness, trapped behind obsidian. Some researchers have proposed it was a tomb, though that theory raises more questions than answers. Who would be buried in a vault requiring material this rare, and why seal it completely, leaving no access? A more speculative idea floats among those who lean toward the unorthodox. They suggest that the vault wasn't a tomb, but a container. Not for a person, but for something else. Something meant to be hidden, not worshipped. The properties of obsidian are also worth noting. In ancient belief systems, volcanic glass was often linked with protection and seeing through deception. It was sharp enough to cut without metal, reflective like water, and often used in rituals. If the people of Karahan Tepe shared similar beliefs, then this vault might not have been made for the gods, but against something. When a fragment was brought to the lab for testing, its surface displayed microscopic polish, almost as though it had been intentionally smoothed, beyond what simple rubbing or time could do. Obsidian is fragile. Too much polishing would normally crack it, and yet these panels showed near-perfect reflection, like modern glass. No one knows how deep the vault goes. Excavation is slow, and permission is hard-won. Karahan Tepe, like Göbekli, is still only partially uncovered. most of its secrets remain underground. And the obsidian vault? It's waiting, sealed, quiet. In some corners of the archaeological community, there's an ongoing debate whether to open it at all. Some believe that whatever lies inside might rewrite history. Others fear what its opening might destroy. The preservation of ancient environments is delicate. One wrong move could collapse walls, erase pollen traces, destroy hidden carvings or buried layers that tell the story of human origins. And then there are the others, the ones who believe this vault was never meant to be opened, that perhaps it wasn't just a safe, but a warning. The eerie part? Local legends, ones passed down for generations, speak of a black cave in the hills, a place where light disappears and voices go silent. Shepherds say their animals avoid that part of the land. A stretch of barren rock where even the wind changes tone. Superstition, maybe, or maybe memory, carried through stories older than language. Karahan, Tepe may yet give up its secrets. The obsidian vault may one day be opened, its contents revealed under the lenses of cameras and flashlights. But until then, it remains one of the strangest and most out-of-place mysteries in the story of human history. An ancient room made of volcanic glass, buried by time, silent, sealed, watching. The compass found in jade. In the highlands of ancient China, long before compasses were ever believed to exist, something curious was uncovered. Buried deep within the collapsed ruins of a forgotten tomb, tucked away beneath layers of earth and silence, was a jade medallion unlike anything archaeologists had seen before. Perfectly circular, smoother than river-polished stone, and carved with markings that made no immediate sense. But what stunned researchers wasn't the jade itself, it was what those carvings seemed to represent. Directions, points, magnetic alignment, a compass, crafted in an age where no such thing should have existed. This artifact would soon become known in hushed academic circles as the compass found in jade. It was first unearthed during a low-profile excavation in the Sichuan region, in what appeared to be a modest burial site. The tomb held no great treasures, no golden artifacts, no ornate weaponry, no kingly regalia, just the remains of a man, possibly a minor noble or a mystic, and this single disc of pure nephrite jade, placed precisely at the center of his chest. What made the disc so unusual wasn't just its material. Jade has long been revered in Chinese culture, but the subtle, almost hidden pattern etched across its surface. When seen in dim light, the lines seemed decorative, but under closer study, they revealed a kind of radial symmetry. Lines extending from a center point, reaching toward the rim. At 12 points around the edge, symbols had been cut with unbelievable precision. Not characters, not decoration, something else. At first, the researchers believed the disc might be ceremonial, a kind of spiritual map. But when the artifact was placed on a perfectly level surface, something unexpected happened. No matter how they turned it, the same point always reoriented itself northward. It had no moving parts, no metal, just jade, but it responded. Some dismissed it as coincidence. Others were quietly stunned. A physicist later analyzed the disk using a modern magnetometer and found a curious signature, not magnetic in the traditional sense, but subtly reactive. There appeared to be trace minerals embedded within the jade, iron oxide in almost invisible quantities, enough perhaps to interact with Earth's magnetic field, enough to guide direction, like a natural compass. Only this artifact was estimated to be over 3,000 years old. To put that in perspective, that's more than 1,000 years before the oldest known Chinese magnetic compass. And even those early compasses weren't jade, they were iron spoons placed on bronze plates. Yet here, in this tomb of no royal importance, was a polished jade circle that pointed north. Jade carving itself is notoriously difficult. It's one of the hardest stones to shape, and in ancient times, artisans had to use sand, bone tools, and an incredible amount of patience. For someone to have crafted such a precisely balanced piece, with these markings, meant they knew something, not accidentally, but intentionally. But the mystery doesn't end with the compass function. Around the rim of the jade disc are 12 symbols, none of them matching known Chinese writing systems, not oracle bone script, not any early pictographs. They seem older, almost alien in their symmetry. When overlaid on modern compass roses, researchers found partial alignment. Some of the symbols correlate with cardinal directions, but others don't. They point in between, possibly to stars, or even to locations now forgotten. The man buried with the medallion was not adorned like a warrior or a ruler. There were no bronze weapons. His bones showed signs of age, perhaps a shaman or scholar. And that makes some experts wonder, was this person a keeper of knowledge? Was the medallion not just a tool but a key, part of a larger system of understanding? One possibility put forward by fringe researchers is that this wasn't a compass at all, but a kind of map, a celestial navigation tool. They point to the placement of small dots around the rim, almost too fine to notice. When charted, They seemed to mimic the position of constellations visible over China's night sky, as it would have appeared thousands of years ago. Could it be that this jade artifact served multiple functions? A spiritual emblem, a directional guide, a star map? A device meant not just for earthly orientation, but for travel guided by the heavens. Skeptics argue that it could all be coincidence, that the alignment is subtle, that the materials could have become magnetized by accident over the centuries. But even they admit it's odd, it's too carefully balanced, too precise for a ceremonial piece alone, and there's the silence that followed its discovery. For years after its unearthing, the jade medallion disappeared from public knowledge. It was not exhibited. No official papers were published. Some say it was moved into a private collection, others whisper that it's locked away in a vault under state control. When questioned, the excavation team gave vague answers. The tomb site was reburied, no further digs were allowed, and so the legend grew. Some now refer to the medallion as the Heaven's Eye, a relic that sees through earth and sky. They say it belonged to a forgotten order of navigators who used natural forces to travel in ways we no longer understand. Others believe it to be a tool of prophecy, one that could point not just to direction, but to events, a timeline hidden in jade. The most intriguing question remains, how did they know? If the ancients had no scientific understanding of magnetism, how could this artifact work as it does? Was it experimentation, observation, or was this knowledge passed down from somewhere else, older still? The compass found in jade stands as one of those quiet puzzles history leaves behind. It doesn't scream for attention, it whispers, a circle of stone, resting in darkness for thousands of years, that may have known the direction of the stars, before we even knew how to write our names. Until someone decides to bring it back into the light, the medallion remains wrapped in silence. But if you ever find yourself walking through the mists of a mountain trail in Sichuan, and you feel a pull, not toward a place, but toward something older, you might just be following the path once marked by jade, a direction not drawn on any modern map, but still waiting to be remembered. Tomb of the Glass-Eyed Sentinel. Beneath the pale sands of an ancient forgotten plateau, archaeologists uncovered something so strange, it seemed like it had stepped out of a myth. A tomb, not grand in scale, not one of the towering pyramids or vast temples that usually steal the spotlight, but inside was something that silenced even the most seasoned researchers. Lying in a stone coffin, half submerged in the dusty earth, was a remarkably well-preserved skeleton, and it had eyes, not ordinary, decayed sockets like most remains, but glittering, glass-like gems embedded directly in the skull, one emerald green, the other a deep violet. Whoever this was, they were never meant to be forgotten. The site itself was in a region known more for Bronze Age trade than elaborate tombs. Remote, windswept, littered with shards of forgotten tools and weathered walls no taller than your knees. And then, this. The coffin was sealed with black resin, hardened by centuries. It took weeks to unseal it carefully. Not a single team member touched it with bare hands. Inside, the body was oriented toward the rising sun, arms crossed, legs extended, robes that had once been fine and layered, now little more than fragile threads, but still visible, still deliberate. And then the eyes. Glass? Crystal? It wasn't immediately clear. They seemed to shimmer even under low light, the kind of shimmer that suggests more than just reflection, perhaps refracted intelligence. The locals had legends, old ones, about a watcher buried in the hills, a guardian who saw in color what no one else could. One version called the figure the Sentinel, another called it the last of the Glass Ones. But what really confused researchers was that this skeleton didn't match the people normally buried in this region. Its proportions were slightly off, longer limbs, narrower hips. The skull had a flattened back. Was it a cultural modification, or something more anomalous? Even the tools buried with the body didn't make sense. There were knives made of obsidian, fine, surgical, almost too sharp to be ceremonial. There were bronze rings inscribed with glyphs that matched no known language. A necklace composed of tiny metallic plates, each etched with what looked like star charts. And beneath the body, hidden in the sarcophagus base, a box. Not large, about the size of a lunchbox, carved from wood, wrapped tightly in a decayed hide. Inside, a scroll made of a strange flexible material, too soft to be papyrus, too coarse for silk, and written on it was something no one could read. Not because the language was lost, but because it wasn't clear if it was a language at all. Rows of repeating patterns, like fractals, complex spirals nested within spirals. It wasn't random. It looked like data, meant to be interpreted. But by whom? The tomb also had something else unusual. Sound. Not a loud sound. Not music. But when the door to the burial chamber was opened fully, team members reported a faint hum, a constant tone. Faint, but definitely there. And when they exited, it stopped. Geologists were brought in. Was it mineral resonance? Was it the coffin's shape acting like a tuning chamber? No conclusion. When tests were done on the eye stones, the results came back strange. They weren't glass. They were something closer to a silicate carbon composite, extremely rare in natural settings, especially in this region. But the weirdest part, the internal crystalline structure resembled something synthetic, which brought up a theory no one was prepared to say out loud, at least not at first. Was this an ancient optical device? Were the eyes not symbolic at all, but functional? Think about it, a sentinel buried with star charts, tools too advanced for the time, and possible optical equipment embedded in the skull. Not placed there ceremonially, embedded. Whoever they weren't just a person, they were a purpose. And if they were watching, what were they watching for? Some historians tried to dismiss the tomb as just an unusually elaborate burial, but then came the carvings. On the wall behind the tomb were faded etchings, almost invisible at first, until the light hit at just the right angle. One showed a figure, tall, robed, standing beneath a massive crescent shape, maybe a moon, or not. Another showed the same figure touching a smaller human on the forehead, as if blessing them, or transferring something. And then the most baffling, the figure standing over a mountain, its eyes glowing, and behind it, a dome with stars inside. Symbolic, perhaps, but to others it looked eerily like a planetarium, or a memory. The tomb was sealed again after study, not destroyed, not displayed in a museum. Too many questions, too few answers. But the legend lives on, the watcher with glass eyes, still looking toward the dawn, as if waiting for something to return. And if we ever figure out what, it might change everything we think we know about ancient civilization, or about who or what was among them. The anomaly at Tarim Basin. In the desolate vastness of the Tarim Basin, a place known more for silence than discovery, something was uncovered that doesn't quite belong. A pattern, a structure, and maybe even a message, written not in language but in shape. The Tarim Basin is a place of extremes: dry air, shifting dunes, salt flats that stretch endlessly. For centuries, it has held onto its secrets tightly, buried beneath wind-blown sand and time. But sometimes, the desert exhales, and when it does, it reveals things that shouldn't exist. It started with satellite images. Researchers studying erosion patterns noticed unusual alignments, straight lines, sharp angles, geometric clusters too perfect, too consistent to be natural. But when they visited the site on foot, what they found was far stranger than expected. Rows of stones, dozens, maybe hundreds, positioned with eerie precision, not haphazard, not ceremonial, geometric, mathematical, formations that formed triangles, grids, even spirals. Some were sunken slightly below the ground, others raised on low mounds, almost like markers or terminals. And unlike nearby burial grounds, there were no human remains, no offerings, no signs of habitation. This wasn't a settlement, this was something else. The stones were not native to the area. Analysis revealed they'd been transported from over 40 kilometers away. That's not something you do casually in a desert. It's intentional, planned, coordinated. And yet, there were no roads, no carts, no signs of transport tools nearby. Whoever moved these stones left no trace of how. The patterns became even more baffling once digitally mapped. When overlaid onto star charts, some of the arrangements matched known constellations, but only how they appeared thousands of years ago. Others matched the layout of mathematical sequences, the Fibonacci spiral, the golden ratio, even early versions of fractal geometry. But this wasn't a place of study. It wasn't a university. It wasn't even a temple. It was isolated, hidden, and it looked almost like a circuit, not electrically, but conceptually. Like each stone was a node, a coordinate, a switch. There were small, shallow basins carved into some stones, perfectly round, with residue that appeared crystalline under magnification. Almost like salt, but not quite. And in one of them, they found a tiny disc, no larger than a coin. It was made of copper, but alloyed with something unidentifiable. It had no engravings, just a single groove, spiraling toward the center. No one could say for sure what it did, or if it was meant to do anything at all. And then there was the heat. In the early morning, researchers recorded a temperature anomaly. Within the stone grid, the ground was measurably warmer by several degrees than the surrounding sand. At first it was dismissed as coincidence, but it persisted. At night, the reverse occurred. The center of the grid stayed cooler than everything else. This wasn't a natural formation. It wasn't a mirage. It was deliberate. Some started to believe the structure was meant to interact with the environment, a kind of passive system. Maybe something that absorbed heat, or radiated energy, or measured time in a way we no longer understand. The area was scanned with ground-penetrating radar, and beneath the grid, more stones, layered, tiered, as if the entire structure extended downward in levels. But excavation was halted, not for lack of interest, but because the sand was unstable, and something down there was causing instruments to malfunction. Compasses spun slowly, GPS gave wrong coordinates, batteries drained faster than normal. The team tried to map by hand, but even sketches became difficult. They reported moments of confusion, dizziness, even disorientation, all centered within the anomaly. Once they stepped out beyond the outer ring of stones, it stopped. No radiation, no magnetic readings, nothing measurable, just a growing sense that they were standing on something, waiting. Some believe it's ancient infrastructure, others say it's ceremonial, but ceremonial to whom? No known culture in the region, even during its peak, used this kind of geometric mapping, and nothing like this has been found anywhere else in the Tarim Basin. Not yet. Legends from surrounding villages speak of the watchers below the sand, beings who marked the earth with numbers so they would not be forgotten. Another speaks of a map of the sky, folded into the land, made not for humans but for those who could see from above, and maybe that's what it was. Not a message for us, but for something watching, something passing, something expected to return. A cosmic landmark, a signal, a forgotten system. Whatever it was made with precision and purpose, and then buried, hidden, and only now, when our machines can see from above, are we starting to notice it. Maybe that's not a coincidence. Maybe the anomaly at the Tarim Basin was never meant to be understood in its time, but in ours. The bone and copper amulets. It was small, easy to overlook. A simple amulet, no larger than the width of a palm. A loop of bone, wrapped in fine copper, and threaded with a dark cord, now stiffened by time and dust. But the moment it was uncovered, archaeologists knew it wasn't ordinary. This wasn't jewelry, it was designed for something else. Something precise. The amulet was found in the high plateaus near an ancient burial ground, a site long forgotten, even by nearby villages. The grave itself was shallow, but well protected. Stones placed in a deliberate pattern, no inscriptions, no name, just silence. But there, beside the skeletal remains of a woman, was this artifact. Not placed randomly, positioned carefully, just over the heart. It was carved from bone, polished, shaped, smoothed until it formed an oval loop, light but strong, and the copper was wrapped around it, not just as decoration, but in a spiral, almost like it was binding something in, or keeping something out. Traces of mineral residue clung to the surface. Tiny, greenish flecks. Copper oxide, yes, but mixed with something else. Something organic, like dried herbs, but older. Fossilized. Impossible to identify completely. Some say it was medicine, a kind of personal remedy. Others believe it was more than that. The copper spiral had tiny incisions, barely visible to the eye, like a series of repeated marks, always 3, spaced evenly apart, almost like a code, or a chant. Not written in letters, but in rhythm. And the bone itself wasn't animal, it was human. Specifically, from a rib. Shaped not out of necessity, but reverence. This amulet then wasn't just a tool, it was made from the very body of someone who had passed, and turned into something sacred. Maybe a loved one. Maybe a healer. Maybe the woman herself had worn someone else's bone, long before she was buried with it in return. It spoke of a belief system, one where bone carried memory, and copper conducted life. Even now, copper is known to have antimicrobial properties. In ancient times, it was believed to purify the body, ward off sickness, and draw out negative energy. The spiral wasn't just decoration, it was likely symbolic of renewal, of cycles, of returning health. But this artifact had no matching examples. No other graves in the area carried one, no temples referenced it. And the placement, directly above the heart, suggested this wasn't worn casually. It had a function. Maybe it was pressed into the skin during moments of illness. Maybe it was used during rituals, placed on the chest while incantations were whispered. Maybe it absorbed something. Pain, fear, disease. Later testing revealed something strange. Traces of electromagnetic residue clung to the copper. Faint, but real, like it had once been exposed to repeated fields. Maybe not electrical, but energetic, like it had held or channeled something unmeasurable. And then there were the legends. Nearby elders spoke of the corded charm, a healer's last gift, said to be made when someone passed away while curing another. Their bone was to be wrapped in copper, and carried by the one they saved, not as a trophy, but as a bond, a reminder that healing always comes at a cost. Others believed it was a barrier. That bone connects us to spirit, that copper wards against what tries to return. The combination, then, might have been a shield, not for the body, but for the soul. And still, no one can say how old it truly is. The grave was dated at nearly 3,000 years, but the bone showed signs of deeper age, older, reused, like the amulet itself was passed down, repurposed, remembered, a healing artifact so valuable, so trusted, it was never destroyed, just given to the next in need. And now, it's silent again, sitting in a climate-controlled museum case, sealed, preserved, but maybe still holding something, an echo of comfort, a whisper of warmth, a memory of healing, and maybe, just maybe, a story we still haven't earned the right to fully understand. Cipher hidden in textile weave. At first glance, it looked like nothing more than a tattered piece of fabric, rough wool, faded colors, uneven threads, worn with age and exposure. It was folded neatly, sealed inside a ceramic jar, unearthed during a dig near the southern slopes of the Caucasus Mountains. Archaeologists assumed it was just another burial wrap or robe, one of hundreds found across the region. But when the textile was carefully unrolled, something felt off, not in a supernatural way, not dramatic, just precise, too precise. The weave wasn't random, it wasn't decorative either. There was no floral motif, no religious pattern, no animal symbols, just a sequence. Dark thread, light, dark, light, dark, light, light, repeated in a rhythm. Someone eventually noticed what it resembled. Binary, yes, binary, as in the language of computers, ones and zeros. And this textile, it was dated to nearly 4,000 years ago. Of course, no one's suggesting it was a computer program, but the resemblance was undeniable. The alternating threads, dark for 0, light for 1, weren't decorative choices. They followed a structured, repeatable logic, more like data storage than design. The textile had been preserved unusually well, found in a dry, sealed tomb alongside a man who appeared to be a scholar or priest, not a king, not a warrior, just a man buried with scrolls, carved tokens, and this fabric. When the pattern was digitized and entered into a binary interpreter, out of sheer curiosity, it produced sequences. Some were random, but others repeated. One sequence in particular stood out. It translated to the same number, over and over. 64. A strange coincidence? Maybe. But 64 is a powerful number. It's the number of codons in DNA. It's the total combinations of the ancient Chinese I Ching. It's the number of hexagrams. And in modern digital computing, 64-bit systems are a standard. But this predates all of that. Other parts of the textile featured mirrored sequences, palindromes, embedded reversals. It was almost as if someone had encoded information, not to be read, but remembered, passed along not through text, but through fabric. Because fabric endures. Long after ink fades, cloth survives in silence. Some researchers believe the textile was a mnemonic device, a memory aid. In pre-literate societies, memory was everything. Songs, stories, rituals. They were passed down through structure and rhythm, so why not weave? Each thread could represent a step, a line, a rule. You don't need to know binary to use it. You just need to know how to feel the pattern. But others go further. There are those who believe this wasn't a memory tool, it was a lock, a kind of key. One researcher even matched the binary pattern to ancient calendar systems and found alignments with lunar cycles and solar eclipses spanning decades. Another pattern, it formed a perfect grid of 8 by 8 squares, like a chessboard, like a storage map, or coordinates. Could it be that this textile was a guide, a map without words, a piece of wearable data? And then there's the material itself. The threads weren't just wool, they were spun with thin filaments of silver, microscopic but present. Not enough to conduct electricity, but enough to shine under low light, as if designed to catch the moon. To be read only under a certain glow. To this day, no matching textile has ever been found. No reference in any ancient writing, no depiction in tomb paintings, no mention in oral history. It's as if it was made in secret, for one person only, for a message no one else was meant to decode. The textile sits today in a private archive, away from public eyes, still studied, still unreadable, but the sequence remains. Dark, light, dark, dark, light. A rhythm older than language, a logic we still don't fully understand. And maybe, just maybe, it was never meant to be understood with eyes at all, only remembered, thread by thread, code by code. Coded Psalms of Urumqi. The winds over Urumqi haven't changed in thousands of years. They still whip across the desert, carrying sand from one end of the Taklamakan to the other, burying ruins, erasing roads, silencing everything. But sometimes, they uncover things too. In the late 1990s, not far from a road construction project on the outskirts of Urumqi in western China, a cluster of shattered pottery was found embedded in a dried-up riverbed. At first they were ignored, just broken ceramics, like the ones often found in Silk Road trade sites. But something caught the eye of a local archaeologist. Each shard had been inscribed, not painted, not etched roughly, but carved, carefully, microscopically, into the clay before it was fired. Dozens of them. Each a fragment. When the shards were reassembled, they didn't form a vase or a bowl. Not even a single complete object. They formed tablets. Thin, flat, almost like pages. Pages of something that read like writing, but wasn't. The symbols were neither Chinese, Sanskrit, Sogdian, nor any script known to the region. No matching characters. No resemblance to neighboring languages. Yet the flow of the lines, the spacing, the rhythm, it all resembled poetry. Each tablet seemed to contain 4 to 5 lines of what researchers now call the Psalms. But psalms of what? What could these broken, coded lines be meant for? Religion, memory, a secret ritual. The dating placed the shards at around 3,000 years old, much earlier than previously believed. Trade routes existed in that part of Xinjiang, and long before the arrival of written Chinese scripts to the area. But the most curious thing was how they were made. The ceramic clay had been mixed with a fine, black mineral dust, possibly obsidian, possibly powdered hematite. Under ultraviolet light, the inscriptions glowed faintly, suggesting they were meant to be read in low light, or at night, maybe in candlelight, maybe moonlight, maybe never meant for human eyes at all. As linguists began to analyze the symbols, they found repeating clusters, structured groupings, recurring words. One shard, in particular, seemed to repeat the same symbol every 7 lines. A cadence, a refrain, the way a psalm might. And then came a breakthrough, sort of. A computer-assisted scan of the largest shard revealed a hidden sequence underneath the main symbols, tiny punctures in the clay, barely visible, a second layer of writing, invisible to the naked eye, double encoded. Researchers now believe this wasn't simply a coded message, it was a layered code, with meaning buried inside meaning, like ancient encryption. And yet, still, no one knows what it says. Some believe the shards are the work of a forgotten desert priesthood, an order of monks who preserved knowledge not by speech but by symbols. Others suggest it may have been a philosophical system, an early attempt to capture sound and rhythm in permanent form. Then there's the fringe theory, that these psalms aren't earthbound at all, that they speak of stars, sky maps, or origins that don't begin in Asia, or even on this planet. It's easy to dismiss such things until you see the alignments. Several symbols on one complete shard mirror constellations, star groupings only visible in the northern sky during certain months of the year. As if these weren't lines to be read, but lines to observe. Modern cryptologists have tried every known cipher, frequency analysis, substitution, numeric systems. All fail, because the language, if that's what it is, follows no known rules. No alphabet, no phonetic structure, no syntax, just flowing lines, like chants in clay. And still, in the archives of Urumqi's archaeological museum, the shards remain, carefully stored, studied in shifts, passed from one hopeful linguist to another. They call them the coded psalms of Urumqi now. Not because they know what they mean, but because when you hold one, when you trace the lines across that cooled sacred clay, you feel something. Not logic, not pattern, just reverence. As if you're holding something meant to be remembered, not understood. And maybe that's the point. Some languages are not meant to be spoken, only held, only heard in silence. Floating seal of Bimbetka. Deep within the caves of Bimbetka, beneath sandstone overhangs that have witnessed over 30,000 years of human memory, a strange discovery was made. Bimbetka, in central India, is known for its prehistoric cave paintings. Figures of men, animals, dances, and daily life, drawn in ochre and charcoal. But one chamber contained no paintings, only a rock, a smooth disc-shaped stone, no larger than a man's palm, nestled in the center of a natural hollow in the cave floor. At first glance, it looked ordinary, worn by time, maybe placed there in ritual, perhaps dropped by a traveler long ago. But when a field researcher reached for it, something odd happened. His hand passed under the seal, but didn't touch the floor. The stone hovered. Not high, just slightly, barely the thickness of a fingernail, yet it did not rest on the rock beneath it, it floated. At first the team thought it was stuck somehow, maybe a trick of static or moisture tension, but as they examined it more closely, they realized it was freely suspended, not attached. You could nudge it gently, and it would wobble, but it never fully settled down. The artifact was removed, cautiously, and examined under laboratory conditions. The composition, a mix of magnetite, quartz, and hematite, all natural materials, but fused in a way that didn't match the surrounding geology. The seal had no inscription, no markings, just a strange geometric indentation on one side, like a crescent fused with a spiral. Ancient writing? Unlikely, but purpose-built? Almost certainly. What made it float? Some said it must be magnetic, repelled by something in the cave floor. But no magnetic bedrock was found beneath the site. The cave stone was ordinary, The artifact had no strong field when tested, no active magnetic poles, and yet, under specific conditions of temperature and humidity, it still hovered. Always at Phimbetka, nowhere else. When researchers took it outside, or to a lab far away, the levitation stopped. It behaved like normal stone, but return it to the hollow in the chamber, and the effect returned. A localized phenomenon, one that refuses to be replicated. Local tribes had no stories of the seal. The oldest legends speak of spirit stones, rocks that sing, or whisper, but none quite match this. Some elders described it as a breath stone, a thing that never sleeps, always exhaling just enough to keep from touching the earth. Speculation grew. Some believed the seal had been placed to mark a celestial event, a solar alignment or equinox that once activated it. Others called it a remnant of ancient energy technology, a device built to detect fluctuations in magnetic fields we can no longer perceive. But the most curious observation came from a physicist who spent days with the artifact. He noticed it only floats when watched. Left alone in the cave, it settles slowly, over hours, until it kisses the stone beneath. But the moment a human enters the chamber, it lifts again. No wires, no sensors, no trickery. Is it responding to temperature shifts from a human body? Subtle vibrations? Or is something far more mysterious at work? Some whisper about resonant stonework, theories that ancient civilizations use sound frequencies to create pressure fields that we no longer understand. In this view, the Phimbetka cave isn't just a shelter, it's a chamber, a machine, and the seal is just one part of it. Whatever its true origin, the floating seal remains one of the strangest unsolved discoveries in India's long and layered history. It doesn't glow, it doesn't hum, it just hovers, quiet, defiant, as if it's waiting for something, or someone, a signal, a return. A memory too old to be remembered. And while scientists debate its properties, and skeptics dismiss the reports, the seal remains in its hollow, doing what no stone should, refusing to lie down.